Dr. Karen Fiorillo, so as I understand it, you got certified the day before the pandemic. Did I hear that right?
I did. Yeah. Talk about the last possible second. Who knew
Wow.
what was going to be coming?
Wow. What was that like? Well, you had no idea what was about to happen. So it was just another day for you.
I didn't know exactly. And I was working at two different gyms, both of which decided that they were going to close their doors temporarily. So
Mhm.
I decided to get creative and I went on Facebook Live every night and on the weekends. And I came up with something called Corona Aerobics, which was free for everybody who was attending. And it helped me get through a really tough time as well as my clients. They were very grateful, which is nice. I didn't really expect anything in return, but they were very generous in many ways. I would get cards and letters and thank you notes and that type of thing. And I just said, "It's good. You don't really need to give me anything. I appreciate your support." And we were using everything around. Yeah, but we were running around the house trying to find things because you couldn't get equipment
Right.
because everybody was doing fitness. So,
Wow. How about that? What did you use to go live on Facebook? Your phone, or did you buy anything special?
started out with just my phone and I was just like, this is terrible. So I started to get what I could. I was scrambling, trying to find, because again, you couldn't find anything. I ran around my house trying to find an HDMI cord and I ended up connecting that to a large screen television so I could be bigger and I could see what was going on. The music started out really terrible and I worked my way into getting a better sound system. But yeah, in the beginning, it was just, I was just winging it. I didn't have
Wow.
any idea what I was doing. But
Wow.
ironically, we were getting between 600 and 800 viewers a night on each of the broadcasts. Now, whether it was that night or the next day, but I still felt like all these people were benefiting from fitness and whatever they were doing.
That's impressive.
My mom, who's 85 now at the time, she was just sitting there watching me and she would tap her feet. She couldn't do the exercises, but she felt like she was part of my world. Just
Yeah.
it gave her a good attitude too, which is cute. And she would show
Yeah.
up. Yeah, it was really something.
How many of those classes did you do?
350 from March 15th, and then we had our 1 year anniversary in 2021, March 15th, 2021, and then we had our last broadcast on the 15th of August in 2021, because at that point I was going back to work, Rascals Fitness in Collegeville is where I was working, and we opened back up again. And in April of 2021, I also landed a job with Whole Body Yoga and Bar in North Wales. So I kind of had two places I was working and getting back into in person because really as a trainer there's nothing better than being in person because you can check your form and you can check your attitude and maybe just spend time talking if they don't want to work out. Like sometimes that's more important than the actual physical workout, it's the mental workout.
Yeah, I would agree with that. What was the deciding factor for you to get certified and get into the fitness industry?
Well, I was kind of struggling myself. Throughout most of my life, I had an eating disorder, and I wanted to find out a way that I could help others not go through what I went through because it was horrible. And when I did get the certification, I had already been working kind of sort of as a backup plan. I was certified back in the 80s through the YMCA. I don't even remember what the certification was, but that was a long, long, long time ago. And since then, things have changed, and I knew it'd be better to be up on the current trends. And when I did, I felt like I was finally doing something that made a difference, and I could help others who might have been struggling with body dysmorphia, or like I was an over exercise or under eater. I was tracking my calories and all, like to a fault. And when my school nurse came to me and said, "Karen, you have a problem. You need help. If you don't call the Renfrew Center, I'm calling for you." And that was my moment when I knew I was sick. So
Mm,
I don't want anybody else to have to deal with that.
that's interesting. So it was somebody who pointed it out to you and you were not aware of it until that time?
Well, I knew I was struggling with something. I didn't really think it was a problem because I was like, oh, I look
Mm,
great. I felt I looked great. No matter what you look in the mirror, you don't see who you see. But
mm,
it's kind of a scary time. And I was
sure
able
it
to,
was.
I guess I was there 46 days. So I was out of work. My school insurance covered it. And I had my sick time. I took off. My job was to get better. So I was an outpatient from 8:30 to 2:30 every day. That was my job to get
Wow.
better.
That's fantastic. I've sometimes wondered in the fitness industry if that's not more common than people let on. Have you encountered anyone since then that you thought had body dysmorphia or eating disorders?
Well, it's funny. I'm almost afraid to bring it up because I don't want to be a trigger. Because one thing I did
Mhm.
learn while I was in therapy was to not talk numbers because numbers freak people out. I knew what my triggers were, I knew what my symptoms were, and I knew how to have coping skills. And that's what I learned from the program. So, one thing I was told is never approach somebody about it. If they come to you, then you can open up about it, but don't make them feel inferior by saying, do you have an eating disorder? Are you struggling with your weight? Are you struggling with this? Because you can kind of tell by the color of the skin, it gets a little sallow looking, almost like jaundiced. And
Mm.
I did see that in some students who I had, and their mothers reached out to me. I didn't say anything to them.
So your school nurse basically broke with that tradition and just said, "I'm going to tell you about this." So actually saved you.
She did. And to this
Yeah,
day, I am so grateful,
I'm
eternally
very
grateful.
happy.
What she
Yeah.
yeah, was no joke.
No, I'm sure. Absolutely. And you said it was a school nurse, and that was the other thing I wanted to bring up. You're not just in the fitness industry. You've been teaching for over 25 years, STEM. Speak on that. How does that one help the other if they are meshable?
Well, kind of. I mean, being a teacher and being a fitness instructor kind of are in the same realm of education. But I do have a yoga program at my school. We have a yoga club Tuesdays and Thursdays in the morning from 7:30 to 8:15. We have something called Focus. Actually 8:12, but to be exact. And children come to you to learn something new, maybe for in a subject that they would not normally have you for. So they're not my class, but they're in my yoga club. So from that point, yes. As far as teaching STEM, sixth grade I teach digital literacy in Souderton. I teach seventh grade entrepreneurship and eighth grade coding and web design. So they're completely like off of fitness, but the yoga part is where I married the two together.
So you're teaching entrepreneurship as well. Talk about entrepreneurship in the fitness industry. Do you encounter other entrepreneurs, or are you basically one of the few in your circle who is an entrepreneur?
My entrepreneurship as a personal trainer is one thing, but then I also have a business with Modern Nature's hair care, skin care, and wellness products, which when I was sick, I lost a lot of my hair and I needed to grow it back. So I finally found a vegan version of a product that could help me. So I've been doing that since 2019. But
Mhm.
yeah, I do find we are in sales. We're not only trainers and we are great at what we do and we keep up with the trends, we keep our CEUs up, but I almost feel as if we have to be salespeople because we have to tell people what's good for them. And I think we all are kind of an entrepreneur, even though we're not classified as such, because I work for Crunch, but when I'm there, I'm running around trying to help people and see people on the floor who might not quite have the best form. And I'll say, hey, listen, would you like to do a Crunch One kickoff with us? Or would you like to do a personal training session with me? And that's how we do help each other. But I do have a home gym, and I have had clients come to me. I've gone to people's houses over the years. I prefer to be in a gym environment, to be honest with you. I like the vibe, and you feel the energy of everybody else in the room, which is great. So yeah, I mean, maybe one day it's something I will do. I would love to have a studio of my own.
I find that personal trainers, they're surprised at the amount of sales that occur in the fitness industry, and it kind of throws them for a loop because when they get certified, it really never comes up. And so one of the things I usually say to people is, sales is really about helping people find a solution to their problem. And that's what all sales are. We all buy things because it solves some problem that we have. Do you have any insights on dealing with the sales aspect of fitness that maybe might help group fitness instructors or personal trainers?
Well, I just be authentic and teach. Give them something of value which will make their lives easier or more rewarding. And I think if you're honest with them and don't try to be disambiguous, just be who you are. I help for the most part, I won't say everybody, but for the most part, I would say perimenopausal, menopausal, postmenopausal, and postpartum. So they're the type of people who are drawn to me. And at the gym or at the studio, people will say, oh, you have to meet Karen. She's really good at this. We all have our niche. And I feel as if I've been through it, so I can relate to all of the things they're going through. And that's been my advantage, I would say. I can't see me trying to be the trainer for this big, I want to build my muscle. Well, I can't spot you. So I'm probably not your person. So yeah, I think that's probably the best thing is just to teach, educate. Don't try to be who you aren't.
And find your niche. And I think that's an important thing that a lot of fitness trainers maybe not think about. They think they have to know everything. And I usually say, you don't need to know everything. I don't know everything, but if you know about the topics that you're most passionate about, then you get more of a reputation. I'm with you. I'm not a bodybuilding personal trainer either, but I think I know my niche pretty well. So that I think that's something that I think trainers should think about. And if they don't know their niche, just work with everybody for 6 months, and you'll know after that. Hey, I love working with X or X and
Yeah.
Y and Z, and then be the authority on those topics if you can be.
And I almost feel like I can support them and provide research, which will support my findings and my experiences. And they love that, like the fact that you can be more than just a friend or just a fitness instructor. You can be both, and you can educate them along the way. Because people have a desire to learn. They may not say they do, but I think we all are inherently learners.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And speaking of learning, as you're a teacher, do you find that being a teacher of elementary school kids helps you as a fitness instructor, or do you think working as a fitness instructor helps you more working with children?
Well, I was elementary for 4 years, but I'm primarily a middle school teacher. So I have sixth, seventh, and eighth graders, and
Okay.
they are a different animal. Let me just say, but the fact that they can learn and grow, and they are little sponges still, especially my sixth graders, they love to learn. Yeah, I think it's definitely a happy marriage between the two. I've found that it's easier to teach adults only because they mimic everything you do. For example, I will say, I'm going to sneeze now because if not, they all go like this. They literally do every single move I do for fear of doing something incorrectly. Whereas the younger kids, they do what they do. And they may not mimic as much as I would like them to. That's what I found anyway. But in the yoga realm, absolutely, positively, 100%, my students follow me to the letter of the law because they're afraid that they won't do it right. And they want to get the best benefit out of each of the postures.
Very interesting. And you said you work at a couple of gyms, so you're kind of spreading your brand around at different facilities. Was that a conscious decision? I know because some fitness trainers they stay at one place, and you're at multiple locations. So again, did you do that on purpose?
I did. I actually joined Whole Body first. I'm a bar teacher primarily. That's my major passion. That's my niche for sure. But when I started at Crunch after Rascals Fitness closed, and before that Retro Fitness closed, and before that Body Ride closed, so it was a really rough 3 years. Every gym, due to COVID, was closing. And then Rascals closed December a year ago, so that's pretty new. So when they closed, I wanted to find somewhere where I could bring my people, because at that point I had like 15 women who I was working with, and we needed a space because the space was taken away from us. They did follow me for the most part. Some of them went to different gyms, but for the most part, they all did come with, and they are loyal, very, very loyal. And that's when you do build a group, they want to come wherever you are, which has been very beneficial. But yeah, one's bar and yoga, and one is more like I teach bar, yoga, Pilates, and personal training at Crunch. So they're definitely two different, like one's a big box and one's more of like a quiet boutique kind of thing. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
two completely different entities, in my opinion.
I've often said that I think group fitness instructors are the hardest working people in the gym. I don't think they get the credit they deserve. And I think the main reason I say that is because you will have a multitude of people in there, beginners, advanced, intermediates. How do you create an environment, a class that can accommodate all those different ranges of fitness at the same time?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that because in school we're teaching to the big middle, and it's the same in fitness. You develop a really great routine that's upbeat and happy, provide modifications, regressions, and progressions wherever possible. You never want somebody to struggle with any moves that you do. So I'll say, if you're struggling, reduce your weight. If you needed more of a workout, increase your weight, change your resistance, add bands, add a ball, like whatever you can do to make it harder for you. You know your body better than I do. It's the first thing I say to them, listen to your body. Because if it's telling you that you're in pain, something's wrong, get out of it, like immediately. If it's just discomfort, discomfort will go away. So I do. I teach you the big middle. I provide modifications, and so far, so good.
Do you remember your very first personal training client, and would you do anything differently today, knowing what you know now?
That's a great question. Yeah, so my first personal training was up at Retro Fitness. I'm just had to move my cat because he's in the way. The cats always want to be on film, I have to say. I was at Retro, and I was thrilled to be asked, even though I didn't really feel qualified yet, because when you just get your cert, you're like, can I do this? Can I really do this? What I would probably do differently is I would probably not have been as aggressive with weights. I would probably have backed it down and watched a little bit, like maybe start with body weight instead of saying, okay, we're going to do this today. Maybe sit down and figure out what their goals. I mean, you always talk about goals. You have to when you do your, not a history and physical, but when you do your initial evaluation. And maybe allow them to make some of the decisions with me, as opposed to me coming in and saying, this is what we're doing today. But I learned as the years went on, that's vital. You have to ask. And I'll say to them, which exercises do you despise? We won't do those, because if they don't like them, they won't do them. If they're happy, they'll go to the gym maybe 3 or 4 days a week instead of 2. So you have to make them like what we're doing.
If you could give a piece of advice for that new personal trainer who's newly certified and is about to get their very first client, what would you say to that person?
Well, if they haven't already, job shadow. Go with someone, watch what's happening, take notes, take copious notes, check out different videos on social media, on YouTube, Reels, whatever, just to find out what people do and how they respond. And also look at people who have not been successful. Because you can be successful in your own realm. But if you speak to somebody who's had trouble, maybe why did you have trouble? Like ask them, ask the questions. Or even if you're job shadowing, ask that person some hard questions. Like what was your toughest client? Without naming names, of course, because we want to make sure that we're HIPAA compliant, even though we're not really HIPAA, but it's important to be very kind to your clients and not release any information. That just goes without saying. But just ask the hard questions, like what do you struggle with? What's the hardest part of the job? What do you like about it? What do you not like about it? What would you change if you could? And I think every day I ask myself that same question. How can I become better at what I do? Because if you stagnate, it's time to move on. And I never feel stagnant. My girls always say that to me. You have never given the same class 2 times. Because I don't. I would be bored with it.
You mentioned tough clients a second ago. Do you have a toughest client you've ever worked with? Without naming names?
I had a challenging client, and hyperflexibility was the problem. And I felt that no matter what I did or encouraged, that knock knees were happening and the wiry arms and not being in control. That was very difficult for me because a soft knee is important to protect yourself from a fall. And I felt like we always had that hyperflexion in the knees, no matter what we did. And I was worried about injury more than anything. So just that was very challenging. We enjoyed
How
it.
did you work? How did you work around the hyperflexibility?
I used resistance because you have to concentrate on the muscles that you're working with. And I don't think she was consciously working with muscles. She was just doing what I was doing. But when you add resistance, whether it be a band or a ball or an extra weight, to be conscious of it, or like a TheraBand or really anything, kettlebell, whatever we added, she really had to concentrate on the prop and engaging the muscles while using the prop.
Going back to teaching classes, do you have a checklist before you teach a class? And do you go through, do you have a ritual?
Well, I mean, the important thing is introducing yourself and making everyone feel welcome, even if they're the same people. And I do have the same people all the time in many of my classes, but there's always going to be one that maybe has never taken that format before or has never been to the gym before. Is anybody a guest? Has anyone never done this before? And you have to ask them, because if something you're doing makes sense to you and everybody else but not them, that's not fair. So I always want to make sure that I'm fair to each person. But I do, it's in my head. I know what I do first. I know what I do second, what I do third and fourth. There's always an outro at the end. You can't just say, okay, goodbye. Like, you have to lead them into and out of all the exercises. You can't just go, okay, now we're going to do 6 of these. Now we're going to do 8 of these. We're going to do 10 of these. Lead in and lead out always. And as a dancer, I always count backwards. But I told them never to trust my count because I lie a lot. I'll say 8 more, and it's like 8 more, and then 8 more, and then 8 more. They don't know when it's going to end. So that's been a big joke. They say, oh, don't trust her count because she lies a lot. Yeah, it's good. But yeah, I have it in my head. And as you know from being in fitness, you have certain exercises which fit in a variety of parts of the class. And you always make sure that you do your dynamic stretching in the beginning and the static stretching at the end. People don't understand that there is a process in fitness. You can't just start. You have to let your body become warm. And then when it is warm, then push it a little further and let the synovial fluid go and get your fascia warmed up. Like all those things that you should do as a good instructor. But if you just come in and you just start hitting it hard, that's not fair to the body and it's not fair to your guests.
Other instructors have told me a challenge where when they're teaching a class, they're facing a class, and if they say, go to your right, it's really their left. And so and vice versa. So how do you deal with the fact that your right is their left and the other way around?
I know you think we were like octopi. We think we have 8 limbs, but we only have 2. So I'll frequently say front of the room, back of the room, green wall, or the blue wall. And that way they can see where they are in proximity to my space. So if I'm going to the side they're going, it will be that color as opposed to vice versa, or the side that has the parking lot, or the side that has the windows or mirror, whatever. That's helpful for me because left and right does get confusing. Or I'll say, I'll go to my right, you're going to your left. So that way we can all be in the same mode.
Do you put different colors on the walls, or are they normally that color? You just pick them at random?
One studio, we do have separate colors. In the other one, they're all the same. So that would be challenging. But if they were colors, that would absolutely be a good way to do it. But you could always just say, move to your right, I'll move to my left, and that way you don't feel as if you're not moving in harmony. Because I think people like to go the direction, whether it's left or right, they like to go in the same direction as the instructor. That's been my experience.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. For other instructors who are watching us, is there something you would suggest to other instructors to make their classes feel more welcoming to everyone?
Well, be there early, get set up early, have the music going. There's nothing worse than everybody there and set up with their weights and not really know which props they need because the teacher's not there yet. I am a 15 to 20 minutes, almost a half an hour early person. That's just me by nature. And I like to set up my stations for my guests. I want them to feel welcome when they come in. I don't want them to have to go back into the weight room and pull everything out that they need. So if you set that tone from the beginning, they won't feel uncomfortable. In fact, the one girl said to me, oh, all the spots are taken. I said, no, any of them are available. I just have the weights put out for you. And the look of shock was unbelievable. I put the mats out, but that's the way it was when I worked at Body Ride. We really, really took care of our guests, and everything was set up ahead of time. We had a studio operator who would come in and ask me, which props do you need today? And they would set up everything for me, which was awesome. And then I could get there 20 minutes instead of a half an hour because I knew the room was going to be ready. Now, it's not like that everywhere, but that, to me, that's a perfect world. You have the support of your helpers, and we're all a team. That's the one thing with fitness is we are all a team. I can't say that enough. From the guests to the front end, the people who answer the phones, or the customer service, the managers, the floor people, like everybody works together. Because if you don't, you're not going to be a well-oiled machine.
So true. When you look out into the gym and you see people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, beyond, do you see them making any mistakes over and over? And if yes, what might they be?
I do. I think it's primarily shoulder placement and the chin. I see a lot of pronation when I'm looking at people around, overlifting, not keeping their knees soft. It's been my experience anyway. The cool thing is my girls who I brought with me from Rascals, they always say, I see people who are not in great form, and I will suggest, not me, them, I will suggest what you taught us to help them because we know you can't be everywhere. And That is so amazing to hear the girls who have been taught proper form. And I always say to them, it's not as how many weights you lift, how heavy it is. Do your low reps, I mean, your high reps and your low weight if you don't want to build your muscle. If you want to build muscle, that's a different story. But just try to stay in your comfort zone. Don't overdo it. And that I see too, people are slamming down weights. You know that it's too heavy if they're in a cage and they're slamming down weights. It's too heavy, probably a lot too heavy. There's a couple things I'm noticing.
Since you teach technology to middle school students, what technology do you use on a daily basis? Especially any technology that helps you in the fitness industry.
Oh, for sure. Well, I like to stay organized, and I use Google for all of my forms. I keep everything in there, keep it in very organized. If I have to look up something, I can just do a search, and it pops right up. So we learn all the whole Google platform. We use Canva, and if I'm doing something for social media, I'll use Canva to create an attractive pull in, like a nice little advertisement stating, sub alert or can't wait to see you at the gym. And just because, it's the same thing, social media, we're in sales. We have to make sure that we produce what we need to produce to get people in. We can't rely on a website that people aren't seeing. Whereas if you push it out to your group and you tag people, it's then going to go to all their people plus all your people. And it's like everybody knows all of a sudden. So we use Canva. I use Wix, so I can use Wix to learn how to maintain a website. Use a program that's like it's called Photopea. It's like Photoshop, but it's free. And I use that to do any of the modifications I need to make in my artwork before I post it in Canva. So it's kind of nice. Photopea, yeah. It's a free version of Photoshop. And we do Google Slides.
For the personal trainer, group fitness instructor who wants to be more of an entrepreneur, what advice or tips would you give them to facilitate that?
Well, don't be afraid to take risks. Reach out to people who you don't think are reachable. And it takes 7 to 12 contacts before a person's going to say yes. 7 to 12. That's a crazy number. So if they don't say no, they say maybe, eventually you can turn them into a yes. So I've had many people who are interested in fitness, but the money, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, we can work something out. You don't worry about what's on the paper. We can work something out, whether it's once a week, once a month, once a year. Just come in and work with me and I'll turn you on to this. Like, you're gonna love it. And that's, it's interesting you mentioned something about a challenging client. Sometimes I have clients who don't want to be there. And by the time they're ready to leave, they're smiling, they're happy, they're fulfilled. But getting there is hard for a lot of my, not my clients per se, but people in general. They're all gung-ho in January. There's 180 people in the gym in January. By September, it's a different story. And then it all cycles again back to January. But I love to see that excitement in January when they have that new year, new you kind of attitude. And we just try to keep them there. We get them there, but we have to keep them there, which can be challenging when they don't want to come. For whatever reason, tired, it's snowing, it's warm at home, it's cold in the car, but we get them there. I'm an author. I've written 2 books. They were both collaborations. One of them was called Undeterred, and that was written by women across the country who had overcome some type of adversity and still had a seat in leadership. And the second one was Feel It, Heal It, Let It Go. So I told a little bit of my story in the first book, like 1,000 words. And then the second book, I was one of the contributing authors. And mine was 12 pages. So it still wasn't the book, but it was a part of the book. And I did tell my whole story. So it's out there about overcoming the eating disorder. And I wasn't afraid to tell my story. And I don't cry anymore. So to me, I know I'm healed because I can tell the story without getting emotional. So that's kind of a cool thing. And then my doctoral dissertation was on cyberbullying. So I've done a lot of research in cyberbullying, and I'm currently in a study with 2 other scholars from across the country on AI use and how it is being used by doctoral students. We're just curious to see if they're using it and saying, okay, here we go, or you're using it as a tool, which you should be using it as a tool, not as your own. It's not your work. Yeah, AI is a big deal.
Cyberbullying, that's very interesting. There was no cyberbullying, obviously. It was bullying when I was a kid, but there was no cyberbullying. I feel sorry for the kids today that have to deal with that.
Yeah, and it affects everybody. And you would, like with bullies, A lot of times the kids who were bullied become cyberbullies because they maybe can't defend themselves physically, but they can get behind the keyboard and become keyboard warriors. And all of a sudden they are valiant because there's no possibility of getting hurt. But sticks and stones may break my bones, words can never hurt me. It's so not true. The problem with
Right.
cyberbullying is, say somebody says something to you and you reread it over and over and over again. That's like getting punched in the face repeatedly, and it doesn't go away because once it's on the web, it's almost impossible to get it off the web. It's there forever.
What would be your tips for parents and students who may be watching us who they're trying to deal with cyberbullying or reduce it from happening? What do you suggest?
Well, screenshotting is important because if you do block somebody, they're gone. So screenshot and report, tell a trusted adult, get help. Because if you don't, as we know, when somebody bullies and the other one comes back at them, the cyberbully or the regular bully gets more power. And you don't want the power to be in their hands. You want to diffuse the power. And if you see somebody else who is being threatened or is being approached, be an upstander, not a bystander. So many people are like, somebody else will report it. No, maybe not. You have to be that person who has a bigger backbone and stand up for your friends if you do see it happening. And in the multiplayer gaming is a big thing right now too. There's a lot of adults who are posing as children. So you have to be careful with that, with your actual identity. I tell my students, don't trust anybody unless you know them, in person know them, and then you're playing the game with them. Don't believe who they are. They may be somebody completely different. There's a lot of catfishing going on.
Yeah, the internet's an amazing thing, but it can be a very dirty place, especially for children.
Yeah, it is scary.
Scary.
And parents should be involved too,
It
because
is
don't
very.
let the kids take their phones to bed. Because A, they're not sleeping, and B, they need to settle their brains before they get good REM sleep. And these kids are literally pinging all night long, and they get to school and they're exhausted. Like they can keep their eyes open. It's horrible to watch.
Right.
And they'll wake up in the morning to
Wow.
play somebody from another country because of the time difference.
Yeah,
So that's like the internet never
that's
sleeps, as we
crazy.
know. So that's just my advice, and maybe set some passwords on the Wi-Fi, like unplug the Wi-Fi.
That's a really good tip. Unplug, turn off the Wi-Fi at nighttime. I think that's a great idea because yeah, because when in the olden days, bullies, you go home, there's no bully, but now it follows them.
Yes, it does.
And I just feel awful because, and again, you've seen the same stories I have of horrific things happening from cyberbullying. I just, it breaks your heart.
Yeah, it's
It
sad.
really does.
And
Um, how do
better.
you,
I don't see it getting better unless people start to stand up
right?
and defend. It's not going to get better. I pray it does, but
When you teach this stuff to kids, are they receptive of this or are they just like, whatever, don't worry about it?
oh, they are. I actually play a movie which is from 2009, which was started, I'm trying to remember, in Manheim, Pennsylvania. And Governor Tom Corbett, who at the time was the Attorney General, was all into this whole cyberbullying awareness. And he created a movie, it was called Sticks and Stones. So I show it every year. And I let the kids evaluate what happened and how did it affect herself, the girl who got in trouble. How did it affect her family, her teachers, her friends, her neighbors, her pets? Like your behavior affects all these people. It's almost like a restorative situation. And I do let them
Right.
watch it, and they're shocked at the end when she gets in trouble. I don't want to be a spoiler alert here, but when they find out what she did, and she does get reprimanded for it. So if it happens at
Good.
home, it's just a little side thing the parents might not even know. If it happens at home, we can't do anything about it. But if it starts to trickle into school, then we can. So if it becomes a problem at school, but they're using the school equipment, so it is kind of, it's a catch
Right.
22 with that one. But it does become a problem.
Where can people see that Sticks and Stone movie?
I have it on Vimeo. If you just go to Vimeo, it's a free web streaming to get the right letters. And
Is there any question I didn't ask you that you would like me to ask you or you would like to answer?
gosh, well, just a little, everybody says you're so busy. Like how do you hold it all together? I just, if it's on my calendar, I'll be there. Like today, things happen and you have to change your schedule. Like we're only human, and I get that. But you have to go with the flow. And as a personal trainer, you need to be open. Like you have to keep your schedule open because stuff happens. They'll cancel. And then you have to make like an hour appointment instead of 2 half-hour appointments. And you just have to be very flexible with that because you're dealing with people, and we have to keep people happy or they won't come back. So that's, everybody says, how do you do it all? And I just, if it's on my calendar, I'll be there. I absolutely will be there. Just be organized and be willing to be flexible and resilient if you have to make changes. I have a day when a client comes in and is in a sling. What are you going to do? You got to figure it out.
Yeah.
There are ways. You never know who's going to come into your classroom. Missing limbs, deaf, blind. You got to work with it. They don't prepare you for that in school.
No, that comes with experience.
It does. It does. You just never know who's going to walk through that door.
Yeah.
But I try to welcome everybody and make them feel as if they're part of the group, and they've been there every day since we started.
Very
I
good.
think that's why it's been a really good positive experience for me personally and for my clients.
Karen, this is a great conversation. I really appreciate your time, and I know this was you had an interesting day getting here, but I'm glad you did.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I really enjoy speaking with you, Joe. And I want to say that you are awesome. And I want to make a plug for AAAI because I just love the program. And you were my initial training with my group fitness. And then I got my personal training as well. And I do go back to get my updates. I just had one last week. And I love being with Joanne. She was wonderful. And I just, I can't say enough good things about your organization.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, my pleasure.